You're listening to a podcast from the South China Morning Post.
Hey Sam, nice to meet you out here.
Nice to meet you, Charmaine. We're currently all the way out here in Tuen Mun at the Tuen Mun Pier because we're here to try a special type of noodles.
Can't wait for what's to come.
And we're not alone today because we've got our friend and our guest, Lisa Cam. Hey, Lisa.
I'm here for nudes.
I'm Sam Evans.
I'm Charmaine Mock.
And this is Eat, Drink, Asia.
This episode is brought to you by Cathay Pacific. Enjoy a taste of Hong Kong's heritage with Cathay Pacific's wonton noodle soup, created in collaboration with acclaimed Hong Kong noodle eatery Max Noodles. Cathay Pacific's partnership with local culinary expertise ensures you'll enjoy a taste of authentic cuisine, even while 30,000 feet up in the air. Discover and taste the difference in the detail at cathaypacific.com.
So, Charmaine, what noodles are we going to be trying today?
So we are getting Tang Zai Fan, also known as boat noodles, not to be confused with Thai boat noodles. Have you guys had it before?
No, I haven't. That's why I'm so excited.
I actually have, yeah. I've been to what I believe is the only other place that serves them off a boat like we're going to be getting today, and that's down south in Aberdeen, but we're in a totally different area of Hong Kong today, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see if it's as delicious up here as it is down there. Charmaine, can you tell us a little bit about their history and what they are?
So we will be eating the noodles on land, but boat noodles actually used to be popular among fishermen who did, in fact, eat them on boats. In the 1980s, Hong Kong had a thriving fishing community. Many fishermen would anchor their boats around the pier and essentially live on water, thus establishing a unique community that catered to these fishermen. Some boats sold daily necessities to them, such as rice, oil, and salt. And some boats sold things like clothes. Some would taxi the fishermen to and from their boats to land. And some of these boats sold food, most notably noodles. This meant that the fishermen could enjoy a delicious meal on board without wasting time getting on shore. And thus, boat noodles became a staple meal for Hong Kong fishermen. But as Hong Kong continued to develop and modernize into an international financial center, boat noodles have become even more rare. For one, there's just been less demand because the fishing industry has been in decline, and many now live on land rather than in their boats. Also, the government has stopped issuing licenses for boat noodles, while current license owners aren't allowed to pass their licenses on to others. It's a similar predicament to those who run Dai Pai Dongs. And of course, the job of making noodles on a boat is tough work. You're out on the water, there's no air conditioning, there's inclement weather. You know, our little trip here was delayed for 1 week because it was pouring. So it's hard work. So now there are only 2 boats left in Hong Kong that still make boat noodles. This one in Tuen Mun and another one in Ap Lei Zau.
You know, we talk about this a lot, another part of old Hong Kong that is almost being stifled.
I mean, cultural heritage is always at the mercy of the economy. We are losing such an important part of Hong Kong history. We have been a fishing village from the beginning, and we're looking at the remnants of extinction.
And you can't help but feel that these places are amazing. You're getting noodles off a boat. Like, there aren't many places, definitely outside of Asia, where you can get this. You know, it's crazy unique, and to lose it would just be a damn shame. So, is that it, Charmaine? I think that's it. They're pulling in. And how does the boat look? How would you describe it?
Yeah, classic little sampan, the iconic green with a tarp on top held together by bamboo. A bunch of tires on the sides for a little bumper action, I guess.
You've got presumably a husband and wife, an elderly couple, and they've got all the stuff laid out just like you would in a shop. You know, the only difference is it's a boat.
早晨啊！咁你哋係有啲咩揀啊？
有啲叉燒啊、腸啊、燒鴨啊、雲吞
So the classic sampan noodles obviously has a bunch of things like the roast duck and the sausage and char siu. They also make their own wontons here, so you can see them bubbling away. Oh, they use 河粉. Yeah. So it's fascinating because on the base of the boat, there's a little bit of a recess area, and they've kind of fashioned their own kind of a rectangular stoves where they've got some boiling water. It's where they're basically cooking everything and cooking all of the noodles and the wontons.
They cut the meat. You can hear him cutting the meat now. That's a big piece of duck.
Seems like a hazardous job. I mean, we're out here on a beautiful day. There's not a lot of current, but I can't imagine doing this on a day where there's more waves and there's boiling water and cleavers.
Yeah.
It's not an easy job, and I think it's a tough living. There's someone on a bike just passing by, getting a bowl of noodles with us.
Ooh, it's very hot.
The guy that the regular customer was really cool too. Because sit there.
Yeah.
It's natural air conditioning. It is quite cool in this spot.
Wow.
So by saying boat noodles, one would think that it's a lot of seafood.
But look at what we have here. Loads of char siu, roast goose. You can imagine living the life of a fisherman. You probably get sick of seeing seafood all the time and eating seafood. You probably want to have something a little bit different. So that's why you would have things like roast goose and char siu. Something to take you away from your everyday life, I would say.
Wow, these are absolutely jam-packed. Really good deal. I mean, how much was it per bowl? Do we know?
$42?
I mean, that is, from a pure economic standpoint, you ain't gonna get a cheaper bowl of noodles. Like, I wish you guys could see this at home. These are absolutely...
Such a big bowl.
Yeah.
Big wontons.
Yeah. The wontons are very good. Yeah. And what about these noodles? I'm going to try these noodles.
The quality of noodles is actually pretty good. I mean, I know it's nowhere like they make them themselves or anything like that. But I think like they gauged making it on a boat very well.
It must be a pretty tough thing to do, right? To keep them not going soggy. And I mean, we just saw it there, the way they prepare them. It's like they chuck them in the pan, they boil them. It seems like they have a lot of things to think about at once, let alone crashing the boat into the dock.
I think what's so nice about it too is like it's so colorful. Like the vegetables are super jade in color. The roast goose is nice and burnished. There's got like that rosy tinged char siu. It's just a happy bowl, even though we're sweating, but it's worth it.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to be honest here. In a vacuum, this is not much to write home about. It doesn't have any characteristics that you say, I can only come here for this bowl of noodles. But at the same time, it's talking to the lady, meeting the people that get these noodles every day, understanding that this is how the working class of like the fishermen and how this is how they traditionally ate their lunch.
I just wonder what's going to happen to the boat after, because really that is one piece of engineering, it's so smart. I think like Hong Kong people just have this way of MacGyvering things to suit their purposes. Like the whole fact that he was standing in a little cubby hole almost, so he's level with the stoves and the chopping board. It's actually very ergonomic. And
it's
then,
literally a tight ship.
He runs a tight ship. I like that.
And I love seeing the partnership at work, like how he was doing the cooking and then she's like kind of assembling everything, like clockwork, they just know what each other's movements are going to be in that tiny space.
Yeah.
And it was just lovely to watch.
The noodles, eating them outside by the water, you can hear seagulls and the purring of the engines of the boats in the harbour. Where else can you do this? It's a really special experience in itself, just enjoying noodles in this way, in a very traditional way.
Well, I think having our little noodle adventure today has given us even more food for thought. We're going to get back to the studio and dive deeper into the world of fun and mean and other differences in between.
Back to the studio!
Yeah! This episode is brought to you by Cathay Pacific. Enjoy a taste of Hong Kong's heritage with Cathay Pacific's wonton noodle soup, created in collaboration with acclaimed Hong Kong noodle eatery Max Noodles. Cathay Pacific's partnership with local culinary expertise ensures you'll enjoy a taste of authentic cuisine even while 30,000 feet up in the air. Discover and taste the difference in the detail at cathaypacific.com.
So, Lisa, before we dig deeper into the world of Hong Kong noodles, can you first tell us the difference between fun and mean? In English, it's all translated as noodles, but what differentiates the two?
I spoke with Dr. Siu Yan-ho, a lecturer at Hong Kong's Baptist University, who's done a lot of research on Hong Kong food literature and culture. He said a simple way to separate the two is that fun is made out of rice, while mean is made out of wheat. In China, whether you're making or eating fun or mean is largely dependent on where you live.
In northern China, wheat is the predominant crop, so they use wheat flour to create wheat noodles known as mean. In southern China, it is more common to grow rice, so they use rice flour to create rice noodles known as fun.
Yeah, that is interesting how it has been translated into English as just one thing, and then the associations that English speakers will have of it being just one thing. But really, if you unwrap what noodles is, and I say noodles in inverted commas, it might mean totally different things in China. These things are not necessarily all the same.
Exactly. When you say like fun, which usually means the rice noodles, but think about it, right? We got cheng fun as well.
Yeah.
And that's a rice roll. And like it's a totally different shape. The texture is totally different when you bite down on it. But then at the same time, it's still classed under fun. So just to call something noodle is...
It's the most basic of basic, the most simple of simple.
Yeah, the impression that I'm getting already is that noodles, to call them noodles, it's really reductive and, like you said, basic. I won't go as far as to say it's an insult, but it's definitely ignorant to the depth and breadth of what noodles are. This is a huge thing from all over China. And of course, with rice being more of a warm weather crop, it makes total sense that rice noodles come from the south of China. So, it's like as you unlayer it, it becomes very interesting. It seems like there's a lot more than just noodles.
Right? I mean, if you really want to think about it, the fact that we actually have different ingredients making the difference between fun and mean and so many subcategories, I think it's even more complex than pasta. Right? I think if you talk to an Italian and you just say pasta, they go, there's so many, that's so basic. Are you talking about this one or that one, right? And different parts of Italy specialize in different shapes, and their base is salmonella flour, right? It's not that much different.
Yeah.
But like with us, we even actually have different bases, different ways to mix the flour, different flours with the water. So I think this time is just the beginning of us going into this subject.
So earlier, Charmaine mentioned the different categories of noodles, rice noodles, carrot noodles, etc. How did Hong Kong come to have such a wide variety of noodle dishes?
Hong Kong
is heavily influenced by Cantonese food culture, which comes from the cities of Guangzhou and Quchao, and the Hakka community.
Dr. Siu mentions 3 communities, Guangdong, Quchao, and Hakka. Well, if you look at a map, Quchao and Guangdong is very close to us. And Hakka, they're displaced people as well. And because Hong Kong was on the rise, they were very much attracted by the economy. After World War II, a lot of migrants from Quchao and Hakka made their way to Hong Kong, bringing with them their food and culture to the city, including fishbowl noodles, beef brisket noodles, and beef ball noodles.
After the war, people in Quchao and the Hakka community had a big influence on Hong Kong because many of them migrated to the city. Perhaps when these new migrants arrived, they weren't used to the local wonton noodles, so they made dishes familiar in their hometowns, such as beef ball noodles and beef brisket noodles. They shared them with the locals, and that's how people in Hong Kong were introduced to these dishes. Some started serving them in noodle carts, while some opened their noodle shops. Since then, these noodle dishes have spread to all corners of Hong Kong.
Besides Guangdong, Quchao, and the Hakka community, where else did Hong Kong get its noodle influence from?
In the 1950s and 60s, many Shanghainese people moved to Hong Kong. So that's when we were introduced to Shanghai-style noodles. In the 1990s, we got Japan's ramen.
今カップラーメンに新時代がやってきた
And then in the 2000s, we were introduced to South Korea's jjajangmyeon. More recently, Dr. Sil has been noticing a new trend.
In recent years, there have been a lot of influences from southwestern China, Yunnan, Guizhou, and Sichuan. We've seen Hong Kong people adapting their mala noodles, sweet potato noodles, and mi-shan rice noodles.
Oh yeah, spicy noodles.
Can't get enough of them.
Can't get enough. I never really grew up with spicy noodles, but this was definitely something that I ended up liking sometime in the early 2000s, back when the hot and sour spicy noodles was a thing. 傷心酸辣粉. It's called sad and heartbroken noodles.
Yeah.
Why?
Because
Do we know why?
it's like the soup is sour as your
Heartbreak?
I don't know. Or,
I think, first of all, in Chinese, it sounds good. 傷心酸辣粉. Like it has like kind of like this rhythm to it. But also I think it's the fact that it's spicy and sour, that it pinches your nose, like, you know, makes you cry a little bit.
it's got that salty, sour, spicy hit that is just, I can only describe it as addictive.
It's amazing.
You get addicted to the heat, the spice, the umami, MSG.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a whole big thing, and I think that's why people just love it.
I think Hong Kong has always been a very enterprising city. So, hey, if this is trendy, people are going to start selling it. And that's why we've incorporated so many different cultures of noodles and, like, you know, noodle culture. It's whatever people are willing to buy. By God, someone in Hong Kong is going to start selling it.
I mean, there's so many types in Hong Kong. I mean, ramen, as you say, was trending since the 90s when Ajisen ramen first burst onto the scene, right? You know, everyone was going wild for it. And now you've got so many brands from Japan. Why is there no decent udon place or soba place?
I know udon doesn't keep as well as ramen noodles.
It
for
can dry
sure.
out quite easily.
So because it's by nature is a lot more perishable, then you got to keep that moving. And you're selling noodles a day. So, you know, again, you've got that rent versus like the amount of people you can get through the door kind of thing. Ramen, you're not just selling it on the noodle alone, right?
You can pork and the egg. There's a lot more bells and whistles on it. Yep.
Exactly. So like, you know, this place has like the best pork, or like we're the only ones that does chicken, you know, that kind of thing has a lot more catch to it. I think it's more easily marketable.
Just more easily understood, right? Because the origin of ramen is la mian, which is the Chinese noodle, essentially. And it's just something that has been a part of the kind of collective consciousness for way longer than something like udon and soba.
In Japan, ramen is, for right or wrong, it's considered a Chinese dish, and it probably is. You know, it was probably brought by the Chinese to Nagasaki, like back in the Middle Ages. And obviously the Japanese have adapted it massively. But it's just interesting how it came from China, it's gone to Japan, it's been kind of had a bit of a reiteration, and now it's kind of making its way back to southern China. And Hong Kong, where we are now, and people go crazy for it.
I mean, going back to our kind of nerding out over noodles, Lisa, earlier you mentioned how the main difference between fun and mean is that one uses rice flour while the other uses wheat flour. So the assumption then is that the process of making each noodle is different as well?
There are a few distinctions. For one, people in southern China add additional ingredients to their noodle dough.
People in southern China add eggs and alkaline water to their noodle dough. Alkaline water makes the noodles more chewy and fragrant. It also helps preserve for longer.
The addition of egg in the dough gives the noodles their yellow hue. Meanwhile, in northern China, they don't add eggs or alkaline water.
People in northern China don't add eggs or alkaline water to their noodle dough. They simply mix wheat flour with plain water.
In southern China, it's also common to see a noodle chef use a long rod of bamboo to knead the dough rather than by hand. I actually went to Quan Ki Noodles in Changshawan.
Quan Ki, is that one of the few remaining places now that does the noodle kneading by bamboo pole? How many are there now?
I think there's just a handful around in Hong Kong. Look, I mean, Marco, he is third generation bamboo noodle maker. His grandfather did it, but then it actually got lost. His dad and uncle went into trade, but he found that there was a lot of interest in bamboo noodles. And his grandfather, thank goodness, actually kept meticulous records on how to do it, what instruments they need to be using, and what's important about it. And Marco's dad actually gave the recipe to his uncle and say, why don't you start doing this? So his uncle started doing it in Guangzhou to roaring success. So Marco's dad decided, well, why don't I do that too? So they opened Quan Ki. And of course, like in that room, you got to turn off the AC when he starts kneading the noodles, just so that it doesn't affect the gluten or the quality of the dough. I actually jumped on.
Whoa,
I jumped on. I know. It is a cardio workout. Let me tell you. I think I did like around 20 jumps. And I said to him, how do you do this all day?
Oh my gosh.
He goes, oh, did you see that I jump off the pole and then rearrange the dough? That's my little break. So it takes 30 to 45 minutes to knead one big dough that can make around 200 bowls.
Right.
Oh my.
Of wonton noodles. I went, oh, that should be enough for the day. He goes, at our height, we sold 800 bowls of noodles a day.
So you got to do that 4 times a day in the height of things?
That is definitely a workout. Is he very, very fit?
He's fit now.
Does it have a cushion on the pole? I think I've seen it with and without.
No. Well, when I jumped on, didn't have one.
Right.
It's actually quite simple. It's a pole that's attached to something that's bouncy. You put that at the end of the table towards the wall, and then you balance it on the other side of it with the dough in the middle. It's very simple like that.
So it's like a seesaw. I'm trying to give people at home a visualization, right?
Yeah, half a seesaw.
Right, yeah.
And you see just people they bounce on it with a certain rhythm. Basically, it was what it was like before they had machines to roll dough and things like that. It was the best way and least laborious way to knead a noodle dough.
Did Marco extol the virtues of what the difference is between traditional pole kneaded noodles versus machine kneaded noodles? I mean, why knead them on a pole when you can just buy a machine and it does it faster?
I'm going to be honest, he does a combination of both.
Okay.
But he says that the texture, when you bite down on it, there's a definite difference. I tend to agree with him. The noodles that I bought from him, I actually tried over the weekend. Mine were sitting in the soup for a long time because I forgot about it. And then I took another slurp from it, and it still had a very good texture. That is not as remarkable when I've made the store-bought ones, like the ones that you get from the supermarket. It's a big difference.
Texturally, it just has more of that chewy texture, and it just stays
Lasts a
more
lot
firm
longer.
in the broth. That's perfect. I hate a soggy noodle.
Agreed.
Does Marco have any next of kin or apprentices that are willing to take on the mantle of bamboo kneading noodles?
Well, Marco is still relatively young. He's not thinking about the future that much as he's just taken on the mantle himself. But he said that he hasn't gotten married yet, he hasn't got children yet, but he said if it looks like his kids don't want to take over, then he would take on an apprentice.
I mean, it is very, very hard work, as I'm sure he knows.
Also, it's a choice, right? There's so many Hong Kong crafts that we hear that people work so hard to put their kids through school to get a better life. And then when it comes to the point where they choose, well, the kids are like doctors and dentists or executives, and they don't want to go back to sitting on the streets and like pulling even dragon candy or something simple like that. And then it just gets lost.
我覺得即係始終失傳咗嘅嘢，佢冇咗就冇咗㗎啦嘛。
At least with Marco, he understood that this is an intangible, cultural heritage, and he does understand the need to pass it on.
Well, thank God that we have people that are doing it for, because he's not doing it for economical reasons. He's doing it clearly for a lot of it, I'm sure, is to preserve, the special part of Hong Kong culinary culture, and for the bounce as well.
So one of the most classic Hong Kong noodle dishes is, of course, wonton noodles. Do you know when they first made their appearance?
We do! According to Dr. Seal's research, wontons are very ancient.
我哋而家個雲吞咧就係一嚿雲嘅雲啦，係啦，吞就係即係吞吐嘅吞啦。但係其實我哋查古書咧有個從食字邊嘅雲同埋吞嘅，係啦，嗰個咧其實
Dr. Seal said that in order to trace the history of wonton, we have to know how the word wonton is written in Chinese. We now write it with the characters of cloud and to swallow, wan and tan. But in historical books, wonton was written with two characters that each have the element to eat on the left-hand side. Comparing the old-fashioned way of writing wonton to the modern way, they look completely different, but phonetically, they sound the same.
Why would the characters for wonton change so drastically?
Well, Dr. Seal doesn't have a straight answer for this particular case, but he said it's pretty common for Chinese characters to change as people move around and as time passes.
有啲字太難啦，嚇，即係譬如燒賣都係㗎。燒賣我哋而家就
So, for example, 燒賣, which is now written with the word roast, with to buy, and it actually originated from the word 燒麥, which means a little or a morsel of the little bit of meat, and mak as in wheat.
So the meanings are completely changed, even though the sound is very similar.
And that's the beauty of Chinese as well. It is always evolving.
I just love how it just evokes a lot of imagery as well. I adore the word wonton, because that whole idea of swallowing clouds. Because when you have a really good wonton in broth, you kind of see the tail of the end of the dumpling kind of wafting in your broth, and it's just like, ooh, so poetic.
Yeah, and I feel like these meanings of wonton and every other food, it's lost when you translate it into English, because the Roman alphabet is 100% phonetic, so you don't get these nuances and that you can see visually in the Chinese characters. So it's a shame, and I think it's great that we can educate people and you guys can shed some light on them. It's very, very interesting and very cool.
And don't forget, because Chinese is as complex as you described just then, Sam, literacy is also a problem. If a character is too hard for someone to recognize, they're not going to want to order something like that, right? So I'm sure, they would simplify it on menus so that people who want a wonton, they go, oh, that's wonton, instead of going back to the original character, which has 20 more strokes.
Right.
最早期揾到其實喺三國嘅時候已經出現，係啦，好真係。
When Dr. Seal looked through historical books using the ancient way of writing wonton, he found that it was mentioned in records that date all the way back to the period of the Three Kingdoms. That's almost 2,000 years ago.
2,000 years of wontons?
That is a long time.
I mean, it's a dish that has longevity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, come to think of it, every culture has its own kind of dumplings, some kind of flat starch that envelops or encases some kind of meat. Every culture has had that evolution.
It's true.
So to think that the Chinese have thought of that a long time ago doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah. It'd be very interesting. I mean, I know it's impossible to know, but how the wonton has changed since then, over 2,000 years. I wonder how it started.
I mean, I don't think it would be that big of a stretch to think that the fillings have changed a lot. I mean, look at the way it is now. Shanghainese wonton puts a lot more vegetables in it. Beijing, a lot of them are pure vegetables. Some would even add ginger and mugwort for their Chinese medicinal benefits. In Hong Kong, it's not just meat, it's about the prawns and the shrimp as well.
呢個粵地嘅方面咧，其實佢有佢特別嘅嗰個種類嘅。
Cantonese cuisine is unique in that it uses a lot of seafood because Cantonese people live right by the sea. That's why wontons in southern China are often made with shrimp.
And that's just modern era. I think if we go back 2,000 years, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like mutton fat or God knows what they put inside food in those days.
Yeah. Besides shrimp in wonton fillings, there's also a type of noodle that uses shrimps, shrimp roe noodles. I'm guessing that's also because seafood was so abundant in that region?
Yep.
蝦子麵同埋蝦子撈麵咧，我諗啊面前呢兩個咧。
Shrimp roe noodles are very symbolic of southern China. Southern Chinese people live near the sea and are really smart about it. Not only do they consume a lot of seafood, but they also don't let anything go to waste. As I mentioned earlier, they use shrimp in their wonton fillings. They also have access to a lot of fish, so they make fish dumplings. The same line of thought applies to shrimp roe. Instead of throwing the roe away, they dry it and add it to the noodle dough to make shrimp roe noodles.
But yeah, I just love hajimin, shrimp roe noodles as well, because you do recognize that this is a very special noodle that was made because of the resourcefulness of fishermen. You know, some people may consider those tiny little eggs just completely useless, but they know that actually this is a really flavorful, really umami-packed ingredient, just that shouldn't be wasted. And for them to kind of fold it into the dough of the noodles is the smartest thing ever. And I just love it. It just infuses this incredible umami into the noodle that just, you don't even need to have any broth. Whenever I make hajimin at home, it's just, I just boil it. And like the soup, the resulting soup that you get from just boiling the noodles in the water is so flavorful by itself.
It's also cultural, right? How we love, like, you know, the roe and the fat of seafood, because in the Chinese palate, that's umami, that's where the good stuff is. But in a lot of Western cultures, it's actually considered dirty. They would wash it away. That good stuff goes, it goes down the drain.
So wasteful.
I mean, we've talked a lot about noodles in broth, but what about stir-fry noodles? When did they first make their appearance?
It's actually a lot later than you think.
Cookbooks written during the Qing dynasty included stir-fried noodles, which are similar to what we see and eat today.
The Qing dynasty was the last imperial dynasty in China. It began in 1644 and ended in 1912. So stir-fried noodles are less than 400 years old. Compare that with wonton's 2,000-year legacy.
Why did stir-fried noodles suddenly emerge during the Qing dynasty?
It has to do with society's abundance of resources, oil, sauces, ingredients to stir-fry. You know, it's interesting because extracting oil actually historically takes a lot of time. It's a very laborious process, and it's something that was only reserved for rich people. So think about, like, you know, you're just using oil to stir-fry the noodles. It's kind of wasting it. People use the same oil to light their lamps at night.
Yeah, it's quite decadent when you put it in a historical context like
right?
that.
And then, like, you know, soy sauces that you're just throwing in some noodles instead of, like, you know, being like a major part of the dish. All that kind of stuff. You know, the time that it takes to make even a chili sauce, even a fish sauce, right? To combine all these things in one spot and to have the luxury to waste the oil. That says a lot about the sign of our times.
I do wonder whether it kind of fits in with the economy was changing. People were becoming richer. The quote-unquote middle class would have been growing. People could afford nicer things and didn't have to be so frugal and careful with the resources.
Well, trade was abundant in the empire at the time. Like, you know, if watching Shogun recently was anything to go by, the Spanish trade ships, right, went all over the world. And they definitely stopped by China. So people were making money at that time.
So how common is it for people in Hong Kong to make these types of noodles by themselves? Are they easy to make at home, like how Italians make pasta? Or is it something they buy pre-made?
I think there comes a price point where it's better to leave other people to do the job. Not that you can't, especially after seeing Marco do it. I think, like, you know, with a good, like, pasta maker, and if you really just hell-bent on making that bamboo pole yourself, I think you can. But You know what? For the price they're charging for those kind of noodles, well, how much did I buy? I bought like 8 for $62 at Marco's store, Kwan Ki.
Yes.
I think it's well worth paying $62 for that kind of labor.
Wow. Support.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a lot of hard work.
It almost seems too little to pay. I mean,
Again.
they have to be competitive, of course, right? It's that difficult thing about Hong Kong where rents are sky high, and it must, this is the reason why a lot of these traditional industries that we touch on again and again, they're disappearing because, they've got to keep prices low enough to be competitive. But this is a damn tough industry with a lot of skill going into it, right?
Well, our visit to Tuen Mun, the noodle factory in Hong Kong, they are the biggest suppliers for a lot of 5-star hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants. So it's laborious. Think about it. This is a factory setting. And again, they can't have the AC on. So these people are making noodles, deep frying some of them, working with machines in like a hot environment. I find it very hard-pressed to find anyone of the younger generation going, sign me up, I'm going to go make noodles for a living, right? Everybody's so pampered nowadays. So it's a sunset industry because it's just such hard work.
What do noodles mean to Hong Kong food culture?
I mean, like noodles themselves, they're always associated with longevity, right? You have it during birthdays, New Year celebrations. It kind of represents long noodles, long life. You never cut noodles, which would be akin to cutting your own life short. I mean, that's kind of like one element of importance that people place upon noodles. No noodles, no life is my motto.
I find that noodles itself is a sign of Chinese culture. When you venture over to Thailand, they would tell you, like, pad thai isn't Thai food. Pad thai actually came from the Chinese. We didn't have pad thai until the Chinese came because noodles. Mm-hmm. And I find that it's a sign of our cultural heritage as well.
I was going to say, I mean, even more than rice in some ways, because rice is, it's natural and you only have to process it minimally to get a grain of rice. Noodles are very much they're a synthetic man-made invention. I suppose apart from pasta, which is a different type of noodle in Italy, but apart from that, noodles, it is so emblematic of China and Chinese culture, right?
Marco Polo brought it over from China to Italy.
Is that right? Is that true?
He was inspired.
Well, there you go. I mean, even that, it just shows how deep noodles go. And I love that the guy was called Marco because that just ties back into everything. Oh my God.
Oh, it's full circle. My
full circle. That's all we have for today. To learn more about Hong Kong noodles, go to scmp.com to check out our video and article.
And remember to subscribe to Eat Drink Asia to make sure you don't miss any episodes. Thanks for listening.
Bye.